Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special bonus episode of Positive Forward Motion. This is your host, Denise Scattergood. Today, I'm having a conversation with Sabine Gedeon, and I'm so happy you're here. Sabine knows a thing or two about taking big leaps, navigating major life changes, and looking within to find strength, wisdom, and the courage necessary to persevere while in uncharted territory. Sabine's strong faith, courage, and the passion to help others will inspire you. And during this interview, we do discuss some sensitive topics such as suicide and sexual abuse, so listener discretion is advised. Sabine, I'm so excited you're here today. Thank you for being a guest on Positive Forward Motion, where we believe no matter how small your step is, as long as you're taking it in the right direction, that's what we call positive forward motion. And you embody positive forward motion. And as you know, most of my episodes are 8 minutes or less, little tidbits to help people remember to keep up that positive motion, forward motion. But they're in a real surprise to have you as our guest today. So say hello to everyone and tell them a little bit about you.
Yes, thank you so much, Denise, for having me. I'm super, super excited to be here and honored at this opportunity. So, as Denise mentioned, I am Sabine Gideon. I'm an executive coach and leadership development consultant, and I really focus my attention on working with women and emerging leaders for many different reasons that I'm sure we'll get into as we talk. But I do think that we are in our society at this pivotal moment and in a space where emerging leaders and women specifically have room to really step out, take center stage, and really truly start to make an impact.
Oh, you're so right. You're so right. And tell us a little bit about your journey. I mean, here you are, this executive coach, and you're doing all of these great things. So I'm sure by positive forward motion, it just didn't happen overnight. So tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got here.
Yeah, where I am today is really nothing like where I started, like most people, which is why I really do focus on talking about growth in a very vulnerable and honest way because we see people at their mountaintops and we assume that there weren't valleys or that there weren't struggles or scraped knees, and in reality, there's a whole bunch of those. So my I can go into life. I was born in Haiti, which is a third world country, came here just shy of four. Um, you know, Typical immigrant, right? Like work hard, do all the things. So I did all the things. The type A in me, first one to go to college, striving and striving and striving to live a better life out of gratitude for what my parents and even my grandparents had sacrificed to be able to provide for me. And so, experienced some not so great and very traumatic experiences, even in my childhood and my young adulthood, to the point of being suicidal and actually planning my last day out. And then I had this moment, this supernatural moment, and an encounter with God that completely shifted the trajectory of my life, how I saw myself, my purpose, and my capacity to help others. So it was not without a lot of healing and a lot of, working through some of that childhood trauma to get to where I am today. But it also translated in the trauma that I had experienced in the workplace with which is most of the stuff that I deal with now, around mindset and what it means to be a leader and what it means to be a woman who is a high achiever or who is ambitious and wants to grow in her career. And so all of my experiences combined, from the childhood to the suicide attempt to getting to corporate America and, climbing up that ladder to realize I didn't want the ladder and had to figure out how to make a leap into something else. Those are all of the components that have taken root, if you will, into me being here today.
That's wonderful. And you're so brave to share your story of your lowest low because quite often it's not something that's talked about. And it helps others to realize that they're not alone. Like, why do I feel this low? And you're right, because especially think of, and I talk about it a lot, but social media, we see everybody on the top of their mountain, we see the best parts of them. And as women in business, I love that you're taking women under your wing and saying, "Hey, come on, girls, let's go." It's something that I've raised two daughters. My mom raised me to be a very strong, independent woman. She was a business owner in the 50s. So I knew no other way than, you're just a woman boss and you do what you have to do. Um, but she did it all, right? The house, the business, the kids, the raising, I mean, you name it. So,
I just wanted to make a point in something that you said. Especially in this time of social media, seeing people at their mountains. And, what's funny is when I was at my lowest in truth and in reality, inwardly, I was outwardly on quote unquote a mountain. So you are absolutely right that we don't know what's really going on behind the scenes, and there is that misconception that if you are in a low place, that you're alone, that you're the only one experiencing it. And the truth is, we don't get to the mountain without that low place.
I want to add to that. We're going to steer right or left, or we're going off track a little bit. But you said something so profound that I haven't even thought about before when it comes to social media. But I've often would tell my daughters and other people in workplaces that sometimes when someone is coming across brass or more than, or maybe they have their defenses up, so to speak, sometimes we can misinterpret what they're really feeling. And I would often say, and I learned this from my mom, she would say, somebody that's projecting that is probably trying to hide something else, Denise. So have patience. And you said something just now so important that I hope the listeners get. And I know I'm going to look at it differently. That when you're watching through social media, scroll, and everybody's showing the best, the best, the best, the best, might there be something else really going on because they're acting as if, or they're projecting this wonderfulness where inside there could be some other suffering happening? And for us to all have patience and kindness, and of course move forward with love and care, and let's help one another.
Compassion.
Oh, compassion. So you mentioned when you got to the ladder, you were like, okay, I was determined. Here's where, I want it to be. And then when you got there, you went, no.
Yeah, yeah.
Elaborate a little
That
bit.
That was another valley moment, or a catalyst to another valley moment. So when I got out of undergrad, my undergrad was in HR, got a job in HR coming right out of college. And I remember there was this like coveted HR business partner role that, I thought, oh my gosh, they're so professional, like they get to advise the business owners. And I remember my manager at the time saying, "Oh, well, you need about 20 years of experience before you can, be eligible for a role like that." And the me said, "20 years, please, absolutely not." And so what I did was I did everything that I could do to accelerate and to fast track my career, including, taking on the crappy projects that nobody wanted to, including, taking on roles that required a pay cut, navigating in every way that I could to, accelerate that time frame so that I could finally get into that role. Then I went back to school. I was working full time, going to school full time. And I was just like, this is it. This is going to be the thing that, allows me to get into that role. And within a few months, I got the role. 6 months into the role, though, I realized, yeah, this is not it. This is not at all what I imagined. And in so many ways, what I realized were a couple of things. One, I was holding on to a vision of an old me for 10 years. 10 years of sacrificing, 10 years of growing. But I was still holding on to that 22, 23-year old, starry eyed, first time in a corporate job person. And here I was all these years later. Secondly, I realized that, the work that I thought, or the impact that I thought I was going to be able to make in this role, it really wasn't that. The higher you go in corporate America, the less that it becomes about, making an impact on people's day to day lives. It becomes about protecting the business. It becomes about, revenue. It becomes about all these things. Naturally so, it's not a bad thing. It's just, I wasn't prepared for that. at least not mentally. And so 6 months in, when I realized, oh my gosh, like what do I do now? So much of my identity had been wrapped up in my career and my titles and how far I was moving up. And now I didn't know what the next step was. I didn't have a plan. And for a type A, high achieving person, like
No idea what you're talking about. Go ahead.
kiss of death. That is literally the kiss of death. And so I had to go into this place of who am I? Who am I really? Without HR as my identity, who am I? And what am I passionate about? I didn't go too much into detail about this, but part of that encounter with God that I had when I was 25, the thing that kept me, the thing that stopped me from moving forward with my plans was I asked two things. One, for him to show me that he was real, and two, for him to show me my purpose. And so when I got that confirmation, all those years of working and moving forward, I thought, okay, this is me heading towards my purpose. And so when the rug was pulled out, it was just like, wow, now I don't even have a purpose. Um, it sounds so dramatic now when I say it, but that's exactly where I was in that space. And it took me some time to really take a step back and assess outside of a role, outside of a title, outside of a company. Sabine, you need to get clear on who you are, what's important to you, what drives you, what motivates you, who you're here to serve, and how you can make the biggest impact possible.
It's beautiful. So when you share your encounter with God, are you willing to share a little bit more in detail of that with the guests that are
Absolutely,
listening? I'm
absolutely.
sure they're all as curious as I am. So go ahead.
Yeah, I've learned through this process that part of our healing and also part of our ability to help others is to share our stories. So I'd gotten to this place where I was deeply, deeply depressed from the time that I woke up in the morning to the time I went to bed. It was all of this negative chatter. I call it the inner critic of you're not this, you're not that. You remember when you did this? You remember when you said that? It was just constant barrage of negativity day in and day out. And one day I just finally had it. I just said, okay, fine. You're right. You're absolutely right. I am all these things. I don't have all these things. And because that's true, there's no purpose in me being here anymore. And so I had planned out my last day, in the sense of I had been working part-time at a pharmacy. I had access to medications. I can only admit that now. And I was going to just, take a bunch of pills. And so the night before, I cleaned my apartment. I was preparing myself mentally, got my paperwork, everything ready so that, when they found me, like, it'd be easy. That's what I told myself. And, as I sat there, I was just like, okay, God, just so you know, as if he didn't already, this is my plan. This is what's happening tomorrow. And I just wanted to, give you the courtesy, so to speak. And then I found myself yelling at God in a sense of all of the negativity that I had been hearing and that I had been feeding myself and accepting over the last several months. I was repeating those back. Remember that time when this happened? Remember when this happened? Remember when this happened? And it was just to the point where I got to the place where I said, I could continue to endure all of this pain and all of this disappointment and all of this if I knew that there was a reason, if I knew there was an actual purpose. Other than that, this is just torture. And so, and even at that point, I had somewhat of I had a pretty, what you would call, traditional religious background where we went to church, we did all the things, but the life that I lived reflected nothing like what we learned. And so there was part of me that wasn't even really sure that God existed. I just knew I feared God because, that's what I was taught at church. And so when I'm having this conversation with God, it really just got to the boil down to I just need two things. I'd stay if I knew that I had a purpose and that you were real. And in that moment, as I describe it to people, I just felt the arms of God wrap himself around me. And it was just this knowing and this validation, if you will, that yes, I am real. Yes, I love you. And yes, you have a purpose. And so I fell asleep on the floor, fetal position. And when I woke up the next day, I woke up with my mind made up that I'm going to stay because God said I had a purpose.
Oh, it gives me goosebumps. That gives me goosebumps. And thank you so much for sharing. And you do have a purpose and you're helping so many. And let's talk about that. Purpose has turned into, as everyone will say, such a buzzword, right? Um, so tell me, you say you have your purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. So a few years ago, or maybe even at that time, really, it was purpose was this thing, right? So, like I mentioned, climbing up the ladder. It was every goal was my purpose, right? Like that's how I saw purpose. I saw purpose as a very linear, or like once you achieved it, that's it, right? It was I guess my mindset around what purpose was really truly limited. Over the last several years though, with, all these things quote unquote being my purpose, and then me having to move on, or them being taken away, or life happening, I came to the realization that, purpose is not this one time event, or finding or uncovering or discovering purpose is not this one time event. Our journey here, like every day that I wake up, is an opportunity to uncover a piece or an aspect of my purpose. If I could define purpose, because I know so many people try to, and there's so many different explanations of what it is. But for me, what I see as my purpose, and I'm looking at my coffee table, so I'll use that as the example. The purpose of a coffee table is to be there to, hold your books, or hold your coffee, or hold your remote controls, right? That's what the creator created that coffee table to do. Now, if we take this coffee table and we put it outside on the curb, it's still a coffee table, but it's not fulfilling its purpose, because it's not holding the things that are doing the very thing that its creator created it to do. And so for me, as it relates to, purpose for me specifically, it's at any given moment, because as I grow, as I develop, as I become new versions of myself, there's new capacities, there's new things that I can hold, right? There are new spaces that I can be in. And it's really just having that ability, at least for me, to connect back to my purpose is to serve, my purpose is to help, my purpose is to be a light, right? How I do it, whether I'm doing it as a coach, or whether I'm doing it as an HR professional, or whether I'm doing it as a business owner, whatever it is, it's a form of expression of that purpose. But being this person who is loving, who is compassionate, who is full of grace, who has a servant's heart, who desires to help see humanity move forward, that is my purpose. And how it shows up in different areas of my life, those aren't purpose. Those are just pathways, if you will, for me to express it.
As you were sharing, it was so great. When I asked that question, I wrote down journey, is our purpose. And how many times that we are thinking, soon as I get to the end of that, or soon as I hit that goal, then that's going to be the big light. But as we grow and learn, and you've learned this at little tender age, and I'm so proud of you to be able to help so many. But you realize that the journey, the ups and downs of the journey, how you handle something that's a big disappointment or something that's horrific, that in itself can be such a purpose to helping others.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
love how you shared the coffee table and the creator of the coffee table, what that purpose was. I mean, your analogies are just wonderful. And I can see why you are a sought after coach and trainer. And tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about when you're called to, Fortune 500 companies, as well as, the little local group, and you're helping. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, and so I want to circle back to answer that, to like after my epiphany of who am I. I really had to dig deep in that space, in that time that I was in, where I looked back over my career and had to identify, when were the places where you felt the most fulfilled? When were the times, or the things that you were doing that made you come alive? And it was in two instances. It was when I was coaching employees, internal employees, on helping them map out their career, or helping to coach them through, interview, or if they didn't get or if they didn't get a job. And it was when I was, behind closed doors with leaders, and I was able to talk to them or get them to be in a space where they were completely vulnerable. The ego was out the door, the title didn't matter, and they were humans. And so those were the two times or situations, if you will, that as I thought back, I was just like, okay, there's something there. There's a little bit of magic there. And so when I left corporate America the first time when I left in 2018, I set out to be a career coach. And that was because, I'd done recruiting for so long that it just felt like a natural progression. However, I quickly realized I don't like writing resumes. Um, so we had to pivot. But there was something that I noticed in a theme in terms of the people who were coming to me were that they were in transition. And it was transition, not necessarily, I'm an accountant at this firm and I want to be an accountant at that firm. It was, I'm an accountant, but something inside of me says that this is the path that I want to go through, want to go to. So while I was able to coach them through the tactical stuff of their resume and their LinkedIn profile and everything else, was able to also tap into the mindset. As we shift and as we grow and as we develop, we are transforming into new versions of ourselves. And, growth equals death, or growth includes death to some extent. And by
Mhm.
that, I mean, there's parts of us that we have to lay aside so that we can
Right.
make room for new parts of us to emerge. There are fears, there are insecurities, there are doubts, imposter syndrome, all the things, all of these maybe not so great aspects of who we are and of our makeup that we need to be able to boldly and courageously look at and make a decision. Am I taking you with me, or is this the end of the road for us? And so doing a lot of that coaching around the mindset, around identity, around, building their confidence, that kind of led me more into still the executive coaching. I mean, I've niched it to the point where now I work specifically with leaders and with women leaders, particularly because even when I was in corporate America, I always felt that they were the most underserved. And reason being was, only the top executives. I mean, things are changing now, but usually it was only the top executives got it coaching, or those who were considered high potential, or those who were remedial and they were one more mistake and they'd be out the door.
Right.
And so
Where's the
this was
middle? Right.
yeah, in the
Best of the
middle.
best, or you have trouble. Where's the middle? Yes.
Absolutely. And as we know, middle, they're the ones who have the biggest impact because they're dealing with the employees day to
People.
day. They're dealing with your customers or your clients day to day. Like they need the support the most. So that kind of transitioned me there. And then women, obviously, because I'm a woman, but I being in HR and various aspects of my role, I saw it time and time again. We see it with the wage gap. We see it with this whole knowledge of, this whole theory of like the glass ceiling, women not being able to advance, or women feeling somewhat oppressed or not given the same advantages. And part of that was, I mean, these aren't the only two factors, but these are the two factors that I identified. Negotiating, right? Whether it be in salary, whether it be for projects, whether it be for assignments, whatever it is, asking, basically asking, and then networking. So really leveraging the power of the people who they have is within their sphere of influence to help them navigate, to help them move around, to have that support. Because we as women, and I know I'm generalizing here, but we have this mindset of, I'm going to figure it out, especially type A, ambitious. Like, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to do all the things, where our male counterparts are like, actually, no, I know Bob, and Bob knows this person, and I'm going to talk to him, and that's going to get me the foot in the door. And so I really got to the place where, as I've grown and developed as a coach and even as a business owner, it's gotten really clear to me how I can take all of my years of expertise, both in corporate, to help, the large organizations, individuals, and certainly the small businesses who are at this place where they're trying to define what their culture should look like within their organization.
Absolutely. I love what you shared about networking and women, different than men in the sense that I can do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to take it all on my own, and I'm not going to ask for help or look within and network it with others in your experience. Because I have my thoughts and ideas, but this is about you today because you're amazing. In your experience, why do you think, and again, we're not generalizing, but so many women will stop there and think, I have to do it all on my own and I shouldn't reach out for help. And, all of these things you help coach them through to understand it's okay and to move forward. Why do you think we get stuck there?
Yeah, I think some of it is the not asking for help. I think some of it is also to part of the networking requires you to advocate for yourself. Same similar with the salary negotiation, and it almost requires you to, be proud of your accomplishments and even maybe a little boastful in in a professional way, but being able to recognize that what I have done a lot. When I've talked to women or when I've talked to clients, they're ones who, because they want to grow and they want to develop, they'll get all the stuff dumped on them, right? And they figure it out and they just do the thing. But then when it comes for them to take the step out to say, hey, here are a list of all of the things that I accomplished, immediately that self-sabotage kicks in that says, oh well, you're bragging, or you didn't do it by yourself, it was actually your team and it was this person and this person, or they're going to see you, in some negative light. So the same behaviors that we're seeing with our male counterparts, we're telling ourselves, oh no, you shouldn't do that. Like, you should definitely not do that. That's a bad thing, or this, that, and a third. And so for what I've noticed is it's the chatter that's happening up here. And by up here, I'm pointing at my head,
Yeah. Oh, yes.
that prevents us from really speaking up, whether it be from a networking perspective or even just being able to ask or negotiate for what we want in an organization, monetarily or otherwise.
And how wonderful for other women to have someone like you sharing your purpose, because this is to help and encourage and to motivate and inspire. And I can tell when you speak, it comes from your heart. When you said you found your purpose, you were alive and felt your best when you were helping others. And that's that servant leadership. It's why I have a podcast and I've done my whole life as well. It's just that it feels so good. And to have you be able to help other women and say it's okay, and then what that woman learns, she's going to teach the next and the next and the next. So I've always loved that you're not helping one, two, three people, it becomes 111 and it just and so the work that you're doing is super wonderful. I mean, it's so great. And you mentioned working with leaders, and I work in the corporate world. I'm a trainer, and quite often when I go in, sometimes I'll find a leader who is put in a role of leadership, and they're managing, not leading, and wonder how did they get the position. Sometimes they've gotten moved up just because they've been there long enough and they haven't had the training. So share a little bit, for the listeners, how they can even identify the difference between a leader and a manager.
It's so funny that you say that because I've worked in many different industries and seen it, especially in technology or even engineering, in different sectors too. But you get someone who is really, really good at what they do, whether they're a technical subject matter expert or whatever the case may be. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like, okay, well, the natural progression is that you're going to start managing people. Without any support, without any guidance of what that means. And I've heard so many experts talk about this for years now, like the difference between a manager and a leader. And some people boiled it down to your characteristics and your behaviors and whatnot. And the way that I look at it as is really, you know, uh, a manager as a manager, you're managing resources, right? Like at the basic definition, if you will, it's about the management of resources. As a leader, you are not managing resources, but one, you're managing people, and but more importantly, you're influencing people to get stuff done. So I do think that, that parallel of, can a manager be a leader and is leaders a manager? I have the philosophy that we're all leaders. We are all leaders. It is an innate trait. At least that's what I believe, that we each possess. Some of us allow it to get developed, while some of us don't. Just like I believe we're all creative in some form or fashion. Some just express it differently. And so when you look at leadership being an inherent identity, it's no longer about, okay, well, what is a person doing? It's, what is the difference between how they're showing up as themselves versus someone who isn't. So a perfect example of what you just shared, someone gets promoted into a leadership role and they may not be ready, or there may be areas that still are underdeveloped. Rather than focusing on, their technical expertise or their business acumen or their executive presence or stuff like that, those are outward things. It's tapping into, okay, what is that person's zone of genius? Because inevitably, when you can tap into that person's zone of genius, or allow them to operate from that place of that zone of genius, they will then naturally, right? And it doesn't mean that the other things don't matter, like communication skills and whatever, but they will naturally begin to influence and be able to affect change in their particular environment and how people operate in their particular departments. I know I'm simplifying that,
You're
but I
not.
do believe
No.
that it really starts internally.
Yes, it certainly does. Well, to know yourself, lead yourself, right? Lead yourself before you can lead others, of course. And I love your zone of genius, that we all have a zone of genius. So, for all the listeners out there who may say, "Oh, I'm not this and I'm not that," you just need to get started. And you do have a zone of genius, and reaching in and finding what it can be. Because I love that you said everyone is a leader, because everybody impacts someone else, either positively or negatively, or very neutral. But if, whether you're a parent, whether you're an employee, whether you're within a group of employees, how many times do we look at someone who might not have the role of leadership, but they're leading? And again, either leading the team in a positive direction, or sometimes, they can lead people down the wrong road. Um, and so many people, set goals that they want to achieve, and things that they want to do, and here you were going, I have my goals, I'm going to hit them, I'm going to get there. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm sure you wouldn't change any of that, even though when you got there you're like, no, I didn't want to do this, because you had to explore that, because if not, it would still be picking away at you. But so many people fall short, for themselves. Like, they have a goal, they have a dream, they get going, and they just don't get there. Why do you think that happens? And I don't know, give some advice on how they can better achieve goals and chances of achieving their goals.
Yeah, it happens to all of us. It happens to me.
Hmm.
For a very long time, and even now to this day, whenever, especially this business and really moving forward in this space as an entrepreneur, it gets hard some days. I'm sure you've experienced this too. There are days where you just want to give up, and you're like, what am I doing this for? And that's where I always go back to my why. This whole concept or notion of purpose. And I share this story about the that night that I had that encounter with God quite often, and the reason why I do it is because it is my anchor. I've allowed it to become my anchor, so that it is my reminder of why I'm pushing through, of why I'm choosing every single day to face a challenge or to deal with some, internal trauma that may still be lingering. It's because I know that there's deeper meaning into my life. And so when it comes to goals, sometimes I think it's very important that we differentiate between those goals and those wishes. Wishing for a six pack, or is a lot different, as we all know, than actually setting a goal. Um,
Right.
Right. Setting a goal that says, okay, in order to have this, it's going to take 6 months or it's going to take a year. It's going to require me to go to the gym 3 days a week. It's going to require me to cut back on my calories and all of those pieces. If we just say, okay, I'm setting this goal to have a six pack with nothing else, one, we have nothing to anchor it to. Why? Why do you want that six pack? What will it mean to you? What will be different about you, about your life? What kind of person will you become or will you show up as when you have that six pack, right? And those questions can be asked on any different level. And then once it's very clear on the meaning and the purpose for it, then when you have those days where you don't want to get up, it's like, okay, well, why am I doing this? Let's go back to that anchor. The other thing too, again, I keep referring to type A high achievers, is we set a lot of goals and we set ourselves up for a lot of failure at the same time. Why? I mean, it's not a bad thing, but I do think at a point, we create these patterns of disappointment because one, we're setting these really high goals, or we're setting multiple goals at a time, right? Completely stretching ourselves, completely getting to a place of burnout. And then if we don't meet a goal or achieve something, then oh, here comes that inner critic, like, what's wrong with
Oh,
you, you
yeah.
should have. And it's just
I
this.
have no idea what you're talking about, Sabine.
Right. This,
Yes.
I read this in a book. Yeah, I've never
Yeah.
experienced it either. But then it's just that cycle of self-sabotage. So getting clear on, being compassionate to ourselves. Like, yes, we want to do a lot of things, but we can't do all the things at the same time. So prioritizing in a space that lets you know that, okay, once I achieve this, then I've created space to do whatever the next thing is. And then the other piece too is celebrating wins.
Mm.
Now, I've been hearing about this. I've quite frankly, I've coached people on this. Doing it, on the other hand, has been a struggle for me. Why? Because my mindset has already always been, okay, you've achieved this, next. You've achieved this, next. Like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? That's not a kind thing to do to yourself. We would never, do that to a friend or, a child. We'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. Like, that's
Hey!
wonderful.
Exactly, yep.
And so it's so extremely important that we're doing that for ourselves for a few different reasons, right? So one, we can stop and really appreciate the gift of what we've created, whatever that is for yourself. Two, you start to pattern your mind like, oh, she's celebrating. Let me help her do more of this because we like when she celebrates. And two, you're reminding yourself when you're having those low moments, you know what? I've got some really great things. And if I could do those great things, I can do this next great thing. So, to recap, right? It's solidifying that why, creating, prioritizing, right? Not overwhelming yourself to the point of burnout, and then celebrating when you do actually achieve a goal or a milestone, big or small, so that your mind and everything else can start to, rally behind you so that you can continue to move forward and meet more of your goals and achievements.
Oh, that is so great. And I was writing so much down as you were sharing, and I love making the space for the next thing. And when you were sharing, like, oh, why do we sometimes burn out? Because there's not enough time and sometimes or energy to do all of the things that we put on our plate, of course. And the why, I love the why. One of my favorite all time quotes is, if it matters to you, you're going to find a way. And if not, you find an excuse. And that might sound harsh sometimes to people, but I go, but really? I mean, sometimes it's that simple to just break it apart. If it really matters, you're going to find a way. And if not, it's so easy to find excuses. So, what are you making more of? Are you making, and then identifying as well, why are you making those excuses? Are you making the excuses because your why is not strong enough, or maybe it is so strong, but it's because you're uncertain? But that's why people come and work with you, because you're this wonderful coach that will help them figure it all out and stay focused. And I'm taking some things away for sure. The celebration. I mean, I just started training to be a triathlete again. I'm doing my Malibu tri in September 25th. Oh, and am I tough on myself? I
Nice.
go out in the open water swim, I wanna do X amount of swim, and I don't go that far, and then I stop and go, "You got up today, you rode your bike, you swam in the ocean, and you ran. You should be pretty proud of yourself, but no, I gotta pick on that one little thing that I didn't do enough of." So, thank you
Mhm.
very much for that reminder, it's very important for all of us. Um, and my goodness, how did you feel? How did you celebrate when you wrote your book? That's a
You know,
huge
I just
accomplishment.
it's so funny because as I'm talking, I a real life example of how I did not do these things that I'm sharing. In the sense of I wrote the book 2019 during a 7-day fast. And I had no intentions on writing this book in particular. I was going to write a book about leaving corporate America to start your own business. And after doing the outline and the intro, I heard Holy Spirit say, "You need to write the other book." And I was like, "What other book? I don't have another book in me." And it was just like, "You need to tell your story." And at the time, I didn't even realize the magnitude of what that was. And I was just like, okay, I'll just start writing. And, granted, all of the trauma, all of the things that I had experienced, it'd been years, right? Years of healing, years of deep, deep, deep healing. I'll say deep one more time. But nonetheless, when I started writing the book, it was just like, it was, it was this mirror of my life. Like, before me, and it was things that I shared in my book or that I've shared in my book that I hadn't shared with another living soul. And so I wrote the book out of obedience during that time, but I also never expected to release the book. Because as soon as I finished writing it, and as soon as I got to a place where I felt like it was in a good place, all of that inner critic came back. I was just like, they may not believe you, Sabine, like they may say that you're lying. Or for people who saw me again, the highlight reels, external, none of my friends had any idea that I was in such a dark place. Why? Because I was still partying with them, I was still hanging out, I was still doing all of the things. And so this fear came over me of like, you have lived such a life with a mask on. Now you've taken this mask. Will people receive you? Will people believe you? Will people acknowledge that this is what you actually went through? And so I had to fight through that. And then, of course, I talk about sexual abuse from family members. And again, we weren't allowed to talk about it. So I felt there, I was feared that there might be some backlash because of that. So, nonetheless, I released that book from a place of I wasn't fearful when I released it because I felt, you know what, this is not about me. I got to the place where I was just like, this is not about me. This is about me sharing my story. And if one person reads it and if one person gets, some encouragement or some level of hope or inspiration that no matter what they've been through, that they can turn that around, then that's what matters. And so I released that book, even though I had my baggage with the desire to help one or two people who read the book. And when the book released, it was January. And so I did self-publishing and just kind of put it out there. And it wasn't until I started getting messages from people that said, "Hey, oh my gosh, like me too." Or "I experienced this too." Or "I did this." And it was just like, wow. Wow. Um and all of it wasn't necessarily like the sexual trauma. It could have been the relationship with a mother. Like it were different aspects of my life that people saw themselves in it as well. And it wasn't until then, which probably led us to like June of 2020 at that point, where I was just like, I wrote a book. I actually wrote a book and I put something out there, and none of the shame that I was afraid of would be there was there. None of the backlash actually ever happened. None of that. It was just all positive messages and positive encouragement. And so it took me a while, but yes, I did celebrate.
Good, good, good. And tell the audience, please, about your book, where they can find it, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so the book is called Transformed: The Journey to Becoming. And you can find it on Amazon under Sabine Gedeon, and you can also find it on my website at sabinegedeon.com.
Perfect. And then I'm going to put you on the spot, of course. We'll have to do some a type of contest. But when we put out a contest, if you wouldn't mind signing 2 books for winners and we'll send them off. So that would be amazing. And
Absolutely.
you're such a bright spirit and you're doing so much good for others and but I can see it shining it's boomeranging right back to you because as you talk about it and you're sharing how you help others, it brings tears to my eyes because you light up. So I'm so happy that you're discovering your purpose. And I'm so happy that, you had your encounter with God and he gave you a big hug and said, You're not going anywhere, young lady. this is this is what you're meant for. And I imagine us crossing paths again. I'm very excited that you're a woman helping other women and something so dear to my heart. And you've taken your time today. You're a busy gal, I know, and one entrepreneur to another. Yeah, it's a roller coaster. So just throw your hands in the air. it's, it's not always fun, and it's twisty and turvy, but there's meaning behind it all. And I always like to leave the listeners there's so much that you have to offer, of course, but in positive forward motion, we're always talking about no matter how small your step is, as long as you take it in the right direction,
Mhm.
that's what I call positive forward motion. So if there was one positive forward motion message that you'd like to leave the listeners with today, what would that be?
Yeah, and so I've actually been thinking about that. And so, before I give the piece, I want to give the example. So, I am, born in a third world country, daughter of immigrants, like have had to endure a lot, right, to get to this place. And so as I think back over my life, right, there have been some really ugly chapters, some okay chapters, some exciting chapters. And, when I can look back, right, it was just like, okay, all of those chapters or all of those puzzle pieces, if you will, are coming together to create this greatness that is, my life. And same for everyone listening to, right? All of the steps that you've taken, all of the things that you've experienced, good, bad, ugly, the things that you want to forget, they are all part of this huge, giant masterpiece that is you, that is your life. And so, if you are in one of those not so pretty, like, rough edged corner puzzle pieces of your life right now, just know that there is a place for that piece, and that there's another smooth piece that's coming around the bend. Or if, as you're on your journey, and I'm going to kill these analogies. If you're on your journey and you've stumbled or you're in a space where you don't see the path ahead of you, to the extent that you can, just all you have to do is focus on mustering the strength to get up and take one step at a time. We don't see the full staircase. We don't know what tomorrow is going to look like or the day after or the day after. But if you can just cherish this one day of every day I got up is a day or an opportunity for me to, create an extra chapter, create an extra line, create whatever in this journey that I'm on, know that you're on the right path. And I do believe that no matter what road we're on, God always, and because I'm a believer, he'll find a way to redirect us. If we're not on the right path, we will be redirected. And it'll be redirected in love, whether it comes through the support of, a spouse or your child, or someone says a kind word to you, or whatever the case may be. Redirection is there if you are lost, or if you're feeling lost on your journey and on your path.
Oh, I'm giving you a big hug. You're amazing. You're amazing. I know all the listeners are going to just get such great value. And again, thank you so much for your time. You're a doll, and I'm honored to know you.
Thank you, Denise. It's been such a pleasure. And thank you for allowing me to be a reflection of you.
Oh, you're the best. My pleasure. Thank you so much for listening in, and I sure hope you enjoyed this Positive Forward Motion podcast. If you did, please help us spread the word. You can do this by sharing, rating, and reviewing this podcast. As Sabine mentioned, we're going to give away 2 signed copies of her book, Transformed, the journey to becoming. And if you're interested in entering to win, you can head on over to my Instagram at Denise Scattergood. And that's Denise, Denise, Scattergood, Scattergood. What you'll find there is a post with all the details and information on how to enter. Once again, thank you so much for listening. And remember, no matter how small your step is at the time, as long as you keep moving forward, that's what I call positive forward motion.